Hi, I'm Pastor Tom Winnick. Do you remember Bill Nye, the Science Guy? I mean, I love the guy. I like watching his clips for kids. Well, recently he decided, I'm sure with some encouragement, to put out a videotape or a little movie where he said that believing in a creator is really bad for kids, and he implied that was bad for society as well. And it's probably the first thing I've ever seen from Bill Nye that I really didn't like and don't agree with. So I'd like to speak to his arguments a bit and show to you, I hope, that believing in creation is definitely not bad for kids, and it's certainly not bad for society. Now in this video, if you choose to watch it, he does it for the big think. In this video he mentions a couple things as passing proofs for evolution, and I think if he would rethink what he said, he would agree that the things he mentioned aren't proofs for evolution at all. He mentioned dinosaurs and radioactivity and distant starlight. All those things are proofs for a long age for the Earth. It's not proof of evolution. In fact, they have nothing to do with evolution at all. Evolution needs a long time for the Earth to be even remotely plausible, but these aren't proofs for evolution. Evolution falls into three categories for its proofs. The first one that probably a lot of people don't know much about, is so-called junk DNA. Junk DNA is the parts of our DNA that are not used for creating the proteins that make up our body. You could think of those sections as maybe producing the Legos, but you still have to put the Legos together. Well, scientists have thought that these large sections that don't produce proteins are simply the remnants of flawed evolutionary process. Because it was inefficient, like chance would be, they said, here's proof that we've evolved. Since that idea first came out, though, a lot of research has been done on these supposedly junk sections of DNA, and more they are finding they're not junk. They don't code protein, but they do a lot to regulate the formation of that protein, and also to regulate how the body goes together. So they're intentional pieces that have been intentionally carried forward by God's plan. And I think as we go along, we're going to see that there is no such thing as junk protein. Right now, to say that it's junk and it's proof is really what I would call a Darwin of the gaps. Scientists have always accused Christians of having a God of the gaps. Whenever there was a gap in the understanding, Christians would step up and say, that's because God did this. Well, this is exactly the same type of argument, only this time it's finding Darwin rather than God in the gap. Another category for proof for evolution is that living things change, and we know that. A virus, for instance, can take on immunity to drugs that were used to kill it before, and that's pretty well known. But all these changes are minorish kind of changes. I mean, we've been observing living things for a long time, and they never change from one creature to another. A lot of these changes even aren't the process of mutation. Some of them are actually built into the creature. I was recently reading an article about the malaria virus, and it has a whole bunch of different hooks it can deploy to hook into the side of a blood vessel. All these utilize different parts of its DNA. It isn't a mutation that causes it to change. It's just pulling out another weapon from its arsenal. And that's probably true of a lot of the things that we see and we claim that it's mutated and changed. Now, the belief that all these small mutations can add up to big ones is just that. It's faith. And this is my biggest gripe with the people who argue against religious faith. They have a faith of their own. They believe that small mutations can add up to the big changes in species, even though it's never, ever been observed. So when somebody says, we don't need faith, it's nonsense. We do not have no proof that Darwinian evolution really actually works. Now, the third category, and perhaps the most important category of proof for evolution, is the fact that creatures share common traits. We call that homology. The argument is, if you share common traits, then you've inherited those traits. But is that the only way that could happen? What if we were created by a superior being? What would that look like? Wouldn't a being sort of take a design of one creature, morph it into the next, and morph it into the next, and morph it into... That's how I would do it. And what would that look like then? You would see common traits throughout creatures, and you could go back and you could associate one creature with the next, with the next. Really, you're associating its designs with each other. One thing that does happen in the natural world that doesn't fit Darwinism is that you can get a trait that's in one creature that is not really related to another creature. And the classic example is flippers. Flippers are found in lots of different parts of the tree of life. How could it get from one branch to the other? Well, if it's designer, it's really easy to see. He just grabbed a piece of the design from over on one branch, brought it over to the other, and it makes perfect sense. Scientists have come up with, I think, a fanciful idea about how this happens called convergent evolution, that the flipper is sort of the ultimate design and you'll eventually end up with a flipper if you're in water long enough. I just think that that is really grasping for straws when you're talking about a system that's moving along without any intelligence to guide it. In much of my reading about science, I've often read scientists say that the vast complexity of living things leads to the quote-unquote appearance of design. Well, I'm sort of flipping that around and saying it's not appearance of design, it is design. Rather, it's the appearance of heredity that you're actually observing. Bill in his video says, well, we can't continue on believing in creation because if you do, there's this big disconnect between what you believe and what you actually find in the world. I have to argue against that too. I think creation does a much better job of explaining several things that you do find in this world. Start with, how do you get the most basic creature? I mean, a virus, algae, they're simple compared to a human, but they're not simple. They're not some little sacks of gel that could happen by chance. They are very complicated machinery, and to believe that they just sort of happened by chemical reactions in a warm pool or at a lightning strike is, it is, once again, a huge item of faith. Only in this case, I would say it's a faith that really stretches credibility. There is no good explanation for that other than a designer put that first living creature where it was. Another thing that explains better is DNA. DNA, incredibly complex molecule. It packs into a very small spot coded information. It's not regular. It is very random in the DNA, how it's lined up, but it does the work. It brings out information. The only place we know where information comes from is an intelligent mind. So creation does a better job of that. Bill mentions dinosaurs. Look at the fossil record. Is the fossil record what you would expect if we have Darwinism going on with little tiny steps? There should be a whole lot more steps than what we find. Instead, we find something much more consistent with a creator changing a design along the way. Bill also mentions stars. Take, for example, the fact that in order to have life like we know it, you have to have probably 30 different factors just be exactly just so in order for us to survive. And the very fact that it is just so suggests either extraordinary luck or that somebody set it up on purpose. I'm not that much of a believer in extraordinary luck. In the end, I think it's evolution that is loaded with a lot of unproven things that you have to have faith in. And that's why I consider it to be a religion. A religion without God, perhaps, but a religion nonetheless. It is faith, in the end, in luck. Now, I've shared with you a whole bunch of scientific proofs that were created. I haven't even gotten into the religious ones, so just keep that in mind. For Nye to claim that there are no proofs for a creator is, to me, just surprisingly ignorant. It's driven, I believe, by a priori rejection of the idea that there is a God. I mean, if you're going to dismiss him just because I don't believe that such a thing can happen, then how can you possibly prove one way or another what has really happened? You're forced to take what you can make up in order to prove or show how things were created. And that's what makes evolution, I think, in many points, a real grasping at straws. He argues that this is bad for kids, which really gets me. And I think that statement is incredibly irresponsible. His argument says that, if you let people believe in creation, they won't be good engineers and blah, blah, blah. It just so happens that my undergraduate is the same as his. It's mechanical engineering. You know what? If you believe strictly in evolution, then you believe that we're just interesting chemistry. We got no purpose. We have no future. Our highest goal, I guess, is to spread our DNA. So if somebody goes around and impregnates a whole bunch of women and leaves, that's completely consistent with a belief in evolution. For that matter, we have no personal value as individuals, so why not euthanize all the undesirables? A lot went on in World War II that we find disgusting, but it was consistent with the evolutionary worldview. And of course, it takes away any idea that there's objective right or wrong. In the end, right or wrong is just what I like in the meantime. And I don't know that we can live long as a society if everybody does just what they like. So is it bad for kids? I don't think so. Nye says that in a couple generations, a worldview that says we're created will disappear. It'll be part of the dustbin of history. But I think it's going to go the other way around. The more and more we learn about this complicated world that God created, the more and more the evolutionary worldview will seem like a stretch, and eventually people will not have the faith to continue on and to trust it. They're going to look for something else, and they're going to see that there only is one other choice, that this complicated world was created